The Montana sky in the summer of 1883 was the kind of blue that made a man believe in something. Wide and impossible and absolutely merciless, it stretched from the Bitterroot Mountains in the west to the endless rolling grass in the east, unbroken except for the hawks that rode the thermals in long, lazy circles, watching the world below with the cold patience of kings. Colt Ranagan had been watching that sky for 32 years. He knew every shade of it. The pale gray blue of a November dawn, the deep violet red of a drought sunset, the flat white of a sky that meant hail before noon. He had lived under it, worked under it, and on 3 occasions that he preferred not to dwell on, nearly died under it. What he had never done, in all those 32 years, was expect the sky to send him trouble in the form of a woman on a roan mare riding flat out across his north pasture with 2 hired guns in close pursuit. He saw them from the ridge where he'd been mending fence lines since first light. The mare was fast and sure-footed, picking her way through the scrub sage at a pace that spoke of a horse and rider who knew each other bone deep. The woman leaned low over her neck, one hand buried in the mane, the other pressed flat against the saddle fender. Her dark hair had come loose and whipped behind her like a banner. The 2 men chasing her were not interested in being subtle about it. They rode hard and they rode angry, and the one on the left was raising something to his shoulder that Colt recognized as a rifle. He was moving before he'd made a conscious decision to move. He got to his horse in 4 strides, hit the saddle without touching the stirrup, and rode down off the ridge at a dead run. He cut the 2 men off 100 yards before they reached the woman, wheeling his gray gelding sideways across their path and pulling his own rifle from the scabbard in one fluid motion. He didn't point it at either of them, he just held it across his saddle and looked at them the way a man looks at a problem he has already solved. "Ranagan Land," he said. "You're on it." The man with the rifle lowered it by a few inches. He was thick through the chest, with a sunburnt neck and the kind of eyes that had learned to expect they'd get what they wanted. "That woman stole something that belongs to our employer." "That right?" Colt didn't inflect it as a question. "That's right." "Well." He looked past them to where the roan mare had pulled up 20 yards back, the woman watching from the saddle with an expression he couldn't read from this distance. "She's on Ranagan Land now. Whatever she took it somewhere I can't let you follow. So you're going to turn around." The second man, younger, with a thin mustache he'd been growing for approximately 4 weeks, said, "There's 2 of us." "There is," Colt agreed. "And there's 1 of me. And I've been up since 4 o'clock in the morning mending fence and I am in no mood to be reasonable about this. Turn around." There was a silence that lasted about as long as it takes a hawk to fold its wings and drop. Then the thick-chested man pulled his horse around, and the younger one followed, and they rode back north at a walk that was meant to look unhurried and didn't quite manage it. Colt watched them until they crossed his fence line. Then he turned the gray and rode back to where the woman had stopped. Up close, she was younger than the ride had made her look, mid-20s, maybe, with dark eyes that were assessing him with a directness that he found unsettling in a way he couldn't immediately name. She had a bruise forming along her left jaw that he didn't like the look of. The roan mare stood with her sides heaving, foam at her bit, and the woman was leaning forward talking to her quietly. "You all right?" Colt asked. The dark eyes came up. "I'm fine," she said. "Clara's the one who ran." "Clara." "The horse." He looked at the roan. "She did well. She always does." The woman straightened. "I'm Rosalind Vega. I owe you an explanation and probably an apology for crossing your land without permission." "Colt Ranagan." "You can keep the apology. What did you take?" Her chin came up. "My own property." She reached into her jacket and produced a folded envelope. "Deed to 40 acres on the South Fork of the Cimarron River. My father's deed. Which a man named Fletcher Dodd has been trying to get his hands on since my father died in April." Colt studied her face. He had a reasonable instinct about liars, developed over years of horse trading and cattle deals, and she didn't have the look. More than that, She had the look of someone who had been frightened and had decided not to show it, which he respected considerably. "You have somewhere to go?" he asked. "I have a room at the hotel in Caldwell." He looked north, toward where Dodd's men had gone. "Caldwell is 12 miles. Those men will be watching the road." A small silence. "Yes," she said. "I know." He turned the gray toward the ranch house. "Come eat something. We'll figure it out." She didn't argue. That, too, he noticed. If you're already hooked on Colt and Rosalind, hit that like button and let's keep riding. The Ranigan Ranch had been built by Colt's father in 1861, added to by Colt in 1874, and nearly burned down twice, once by accident and once by people who hadn't been prepared for how hard Colt Ranigan was to run off. It sat in a fold of the valley like something that had grown there organically, long and low and weathered silver gray, surrounded by cottonwoods that his mother had planted along the creek when they were still saplings and which were now tall enough to make real shade. Rosalind Vega sat at the kitchen table and ate like someone who hadn't eaten since morning and wasn't going to admit it. His housekeeper, an undemonstrative woman named Mrs. Aldine who had worked for the ranch for 11 years, had produced bread and cold beef and a pot of coffee without being asked, and had taken in Rosalind's bruised jaw and dusty clothes with a glance that said she understood the situation and had opinions about it. Colt sat across the table and listened to Rosalind explain Fletcher Dodd. Dodd was a land broker out of Wichita who had been moving through southern Montana for the past 2 years, acquiring small parcels by any means available, purchase where possible, pressure where necessary, forgery when he thought he could get away with it. He'd been mostly right about that last part. The law in Caldwell was technically functional but practically accommodating of men with money, and Dodd had money. "My father homesteaded that land in 1869, Rosalind said. "Built everything on it himself. He was 53 years old when he died, and he died knowing the deed was clear and the land was paid for." She was looking at the table when she said it. "I was there when 2 of Dodd's men came to the house a week after the funeral with a document claiming my father had sold the property in March. It was a forgery. I knew his signature." "What did you do?" "I went to the land office in Caldwell." She looked up. "The clerk told me the document appeared valid. I had 3 days to contest it or vacate." "And the deed you have?" "Was in my father's strongbox. I went back for it last night." Dodd had a man watching the house. She touched her jaw reflexively, then stopped. "The deed was where my father left it. I got out." Colt was quiet for a moment. Outside, the summer afternoon was getting long, the light turning amber through the cottonwood leaves. "How many men does Dodd have working for him?" "I've seen at least 6. Maybe more." "The land office clerk, is he honest?" Something shifted in her expression. "His name is Turner. He's been in Caldwell 3 years. I think he's afraid of Dodd, but I don't think he's corrupt." "There's a difference." "There is," Colt agreed. He was aware that he had been watching her face more than he should, tracking the small changes in it the way he tracked weather. Not because he needed to but because it interested him in a way that was becoming difficult to attribute purely to the situation. "You don't have to be involved in this," Rosalind said. It came out levelly, without apology. "You helped me today. That's more than most people would do. I can figure out the rest." "Can you?" "I'm not helpless, Mr. Ranigan." "I noticed that," he said. "I also noticed you've got 2 men who've seen your face watching the road between here and town, and a land broker who plays rough and has a 6-day head start on burying your deed under paperwork." He pushed back from the table. "I know a lawyer in Billings. Frank Holt. He's the kind of man who doesn't care who Dodd is or what the Caldwell clerk is afraid of. If we can get him a copy of that deed by tomorrow morning, he can have a challenge filed before Dodd knows what's coming." Rosalind was very still. "Why would you do that?" He thought about it honestly for a second. "Because your father built something and you're trying to keep it." And because Dodd's the kind of man who gets comfortable when nobody pushes back. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "There's a stage to Billings that goes through Hartley Junction at 6 in the morning." "I know. I ride faster than the stage." Another silence. Shorter this time. "All right, Mr. Rannigan." "Colt." "All right, Colt." He got up to make arrangements. He was halfway across the kitchen when Mrs. Aldine appeared in the doorway and looked at him with an expression of vast, unspeakable patience, the way a woman looks at a man who has been slow to realize something she figured out in the first 5 minutes. He ignored her, which was the only reasonable response. That night, Dodd's men came. Not all 6. 3 of them, coming up through the south pasture in the dark, which was either bold or stupid and was in practice both. Colt had spent enough years in this valley to feel when the land felt wrong, and he'd been sitting on the porch for 2 hours before they appeared, rifle across his knees, listening to the horses shifting in the corral. The first shot went into the porch post 6 inches from his head. He was already moving. He went off the porch low and fast, rolling into the shadow of the water trough, and came up firing at the muzzle flash in the darkness. One of the men yelped and the shooting stopped. He heard boots on hard ground, retreating, then the sound of horses picking up speed and going south. He stood in the darkness for a moment, listening to them go. Then he heard the front door and turned to find Rosalind in the doorway with a shotgun she had apparently located somewhere in the house, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her expression absolutely composed. "3, she said. "All gone south." "You counted." "I was watching from the window." He looked at her standing there in the lamplight, the shotgun held correctly, the fear she must have been feeling invisible on her face, and he felt something shift in his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time and hadn't expected to feel in the middle of a gunfight. "Come inside," he said. "I'll put coffee on. It's 2 in the morning. I know what time it is." She stepped back from the door and let him in. Neither of them mentioned what had just happened, but something had changed between them in those 2 minutes in the dark, some invisible distance had collapsed, and they both knew it and didn't speak about it, which was perhaps the most honest thing 2 people could do at 2 in the morning after someone had tried to shoot them. This story is heating up fast. Subscribe so you never miss a Cowboy Frontier Tales release. Colt left before dawn. He left Mrs. Aldine with instructions and a look that communicated the rest of it, and he left 2 of his ranch hands, good men, steady, ex-cavalry both, with instructions that were considerably more direct. He left Rosalind's roan mare in the corral with fresh water and good hay. He did not leave without stopping at the door of the guest room and standing there for 30 seconds like a fool, and then deciding that what he needed to say would wait until he came back, and riding out. The ride to Billings took 5 hours hard. Frank Holt was in his office when Colt arrived, because Frank Holt was always in his office. A small, precise man who wore good suits and read law the way other men read weather, with a combination of deep understanding and righteous irritation at its inconsistencies. He read the deed copy Colt had brought in about 4 minutes. Then he looked up. The forged sale document, when was it dated? March 14th. And the father died in April. April 2nd. So this woman's father allegedly sold his land 6 weeks before he died. Holt's tone was very flat. Without telling his daughter. Without moving his deed from the family strongbox. Without, he stopped. What's Dodd's man at the land office named? Turner. Clerk. He's scared, not bought. Holt nodded slowly. Turner will talk if the right person asks him the right way. And the right person is not you, Colt, before you suggest it, because you've already been shot at and your perspective is not currently what I'd call legally objective. I wasn't going to suggest anything. You were absolutely going to suggest something. Sit down and let me think. Colt sat. Holt thought for 11 minutes, which Colt knew because there was a clock on the wall and he had nothing else to look at. Then Holt said, I can file a challenge to the conveyance on the basis of forged signature and undue process. I need Miss Vega's sworn statement and I need it today. Can you get her here? It's a 5-hour ride. Can you get her here? Colt thought about the two men watching the road. He thought about the south pasture in the dark and Rosalind standing in the doorway with a shotgun she'd found in a house she'd been in for 6 hours. Yes, he said. I can. He was back at the ranch by early afternoon. Rosalind was in the corral with Clara when he rode in, doing something with the mare's left rear leg that involved a poultice and a lot of quiet talk. She looked up at the sound of hooves, and something in her face, just for a second, before she got control of it, told him that she'd been watching for him to come back. He told her about Holt. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "If I go to Billings, Dodd will know I've got legal help. He'll move fast. He's already moving fast. Fast is the only speed he's got. What about," she gestured toward the house, toward his land. "My men can handle it. And Dodd's not interested in picking a fight with me once you're not here. I'm not the target, Rosalind. You are." She was quiet for a moment, her hand resting on Clara's neck. The afternoon light was heavy and golden and it caught in her dark hair and along the line of her jaw, which was still bruised but less angry-looking than the day before. "You've done a lot for someone you met 24 hours ago," she said. "The time doesn't have much to do with it." She looked at him directly. "What does it have to do with?" He should have said something practical. Something about the law or the deed or the ride to Billings. He said, "I'd like to keep doing it. If that's all right with you." A silence. A different kind of silence than the ones before it. "The 40 acres on the South Fork," she said slowly. "It's good land. River access. My father had plans for it." "What kind of plans?" "A horse ranch." She was still looking at him. He said a woman who could raise horses the way he'd taught her could do anything she wanted in this country. He said all she needed was good land and someone worth sharing it with. Colt was quiet for a long moment. "Your father sounds like a smart man." "He was the smartest man I ever knew," she said. "Until recently." He looked at her. She looked back. Clara shifted under her hand with the patient indifference of a horse that had seen enough of human beings to find them largely predictable, but still mildly entertaining. "We should ride," Colt said. "We should," Rosalind agreed. They rode. "We're almost at the finish line. Stay with us." Frank Holt filed the challenge to the conveyance at 4:15 in the afternoon. By 4:45, he had also, through channels that he declined to explain in detail, communicated to Turner the land office clerk that a federal land commissioner would be visiting Caldwell in the coming week and would be deeply interested in any irregularities in recent title transfers. Turner talked. He talked for 2 hours, and what he said was more than enough. Dodd had pressured him into certifying the forged document. He had the original paperwork. He knew where Dodd had filed 3 other fraudulent transfers in the past 18 months. Holt sat across from Colt and Rosalind in his office as the day went blue dark outside and said, in the tone of a man delivering a verdict, "The deed is yours, Miss Vega. Dodd will fight it, but he'll fight it in a courtroom, and in a courtroom I will take him apart like a pocket watch." Rosalind received this information with the same composure she had brought to everything, the ride across Colt's north pasture, the men in the dark, the morning she'd woken up in a stranger's house and had to decide whether to trust him. She thanked Holt quietly and shook his hand. Outside, on the street in front of Holt's office, the evening air was cool and smelled of horses and summer dust and something cooking from the hotel kitchen down the block. The first stars were coming up over the mountains. "It's too late to ride back tonight," Colt said. "I know. Holt will put us up. He's got rooms above the office for clients." "All right." Neither of them moved. Down the street, a dog barked twice and stopped. "When this is settled," Colt said. "The land. The horses you're going to raise on it. That's 40 acres, and 40 acres of river bottom requires a lot of work. It does, Rosalind said. I've got 400 acres that border the South Fork on the east side. She was very still. I know. Your father homesteaded that in '61. He looked at her. You know my land. I grew up in this valley, Colt. I know every deed on the South Fork. A pause. I know yours borders mine. I've known since I was 12 years old. Something in that undid him completely, quietly, in a way that he suspected was permanent. The knowledge that this woman had known the shape of the land between them before he'd ever laid eyes on her, that they had been neighbors in some truer sense than proximity for 20 years without knowing it, and that it had taken a forger and a pair of hired guns and a dead run across his north pasture to close the distance. I'd like to be a good neighbor, he said. She turned to look at him. The stars were brightening. Her dark eyes were steady and warm and entirely certain. You already are, she said. But I think you could be more. He reached out and took her hand, and she let him. And they stood there on the street in Billings in the summer dark with the mountains black against the stars and 40 years of Montana ahead of them and all the particular, fierce, unhurried certainty of two people who have found the exact right thing at the exact right time. It is worth saying that Mrs. Aldine, back at the Rannigan Ranch, had already told the two ranch hands that she expected there would be changes coming and that nobody should act surprised. She was not, on this point, wrong. The legal challenge to Fletcher Dodd took 4 months to resolve and ended with Dodd facing charges on 3 separate counts of fraudulent conveyance, Turner the land office clerk receiving a commendation from the territorial governor for his cooperation, and Frank Holt billing Colt Rannigan for exactly half his standard rate with the note, consider the other half a wedding gift. The deed to 40 acres on the South Fork of the Cimarron River was affirmed in the name of Rosalind Maria Vega on a Tuesday in October. She framed it. She hung it on the wall of the house they were already building together on the ridge where the Rannigan land met hers, where you could see the river in both directions and the mountains in every direction, where the horses moved through the grass in the early light like something out of a dream of the world before it got complicated. Clara got the first stall in the new barn and the best hay and a view of the mountains, because she had earned it. Colt Rannigan had watched the Montana sky for 32 years. He kept watching it, because it was still the kind of blue that made a man believe in something. But now when he stood on the ridge in the morning and looked out at the wide impossible country, he was not alone, and the sky was not the best thing in it. That distinction belonged to the woman beside him, who had ridden into his life at a dead run on a fast-roan mare with 2 hired guns at her back and a dead man's deed pressed to her heart, and who had not slowed down since. He would not have wanted her any other way. Thank you for riding with Cowboy Frontier Tales. If this story moved you, share it with someone who loves the frontier. Subscribe for a new story every week.